Helen, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm really glad that we managed to nail down a time and get it. But how are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. It's obviously been an interesting year, hasn't it, for everybody? Constantly learning stuff, new stuff about myself, new challenges,
Well, and also
but a good year as well.
you're also this is your first full year of being a mum, isn't it? This
Yes,
is
I was
yeah.
just about to say, yeah. So gave birth um, last New Year's Eve,
Wow.
and yeah, had and actually having five for it during this pandemic has been a real godsend. Just feel incredibly grateful and lucky to have had her in our lives to give us a bit of joy in this
Yeah.
difficult year. Yeah.
I imagine it's been because we were just talking about you doing coaching, and I imagine you travel, and there would have been that you probably planned for at the start of last year that you might be away. How am I going to manage it? And you've probably had, I'm guessing, a little bit more time to be with her and cherish the first year, which would be amazing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I didn't have a huge amount in the diary. I had personally blocked a little bit of time out. But certainly my wife Kate was, would have been here, there, and everywhere. Um, so yeah, we've definitely been able to spend some really good quality time in the first year, which is really nice.
So, what have you managed to get yourself up to during lockdown as a pair, as a family?
Well, in the first lockdown, I actually, after about a couple of months, I was getting a bit low actually. I think just kind of having given birth and you know that kind of feeling of not necessarily feeling like myself, and obviously all the new changes that had come in, and then I was seeing everybody else go out and do all their running and stuff like that, and I kind of wanted to get involved, and so I started the Couch to 5K,
Oh, awesome! Yeah.
which yeah, which I think for lots of people they were like, why would an Olympic athlete need to do a Couch to 5K? And it just kind of it was great for me to be able to share it with people on my Instagram account because of that reason. Like when I was playing sport, when I was playing hockey, my fitness was my weakest point by a long shot. I was a proper games player. I could play sport, but doing the kind of running, the fitness, that was I had to work incredibly hard at that. Didn't come naturally at all. So um yeah, for me to do the Couch to 5K was the most obvious thing because it just started off gradually from where I was physically, not in great shape at all. Obviously, I'd given birth, I wasn't necessarily putting pressure on myself, um, but it was nice to be able to share that and get a lot of support as well along the way.
How long does it? How long? I haven't done the couch to 5K. How long does it take? So, what is the weeks or months, or how long does it take
Yeah,
to do?
if I remember rightly, I think it's nine weeks, and you start off. The first week is three it's 3 sessions a week, and you listen to a podcast and it guides you through. It tells you when to run, when to walk in the first bit. So the first week is literally like a few minutes running and the
Mm.
rest is walking. And that's how it builds it up, and it's really good as a kind of national NHS initiative. It is really good, and I can highly recommend it for anybody who wants
Yeah,
to start running.
I
Yeah.
think that's actually a really good one for young athletes to get started in. I put in with my team out here for the first time they've ever had it. Put in fitness tests. I mean, it's amateur sport, but I tried to bring in an element of discipline, and I'm a big believer in that. If you're disciplined with your physical fitness, it goes into your sport, your skills, whatever element you do. You don't have to like it, like you were saying there. You don't have to like it, but it will be a part of it, and it crosses over. It transfers there somewhere. And yeah, we set a 2K challenge, so we set just 2K for these guys who are anywhere between 13 12 actually to 16, and
Hmm.
I just think it's a base level of fitness that is achievable. Yeah, so a couch to 5K is a good number. It's a good set target to get to, and yeah, I'll be recommending that one for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. And actually, the challenge is to try and get a 5K in 30 minutes. I didn't achieve that.
Right.
And I tried to like continue with my training, but I hit a few kind of obstacles, and so I haven't actually been able to achieve 5K in 30 minutes. But I did 5K, and that's I'm happy with that.
Yeah, get into it. So for you as a hockey player, where did that journey start? Maybe it was on the couch, but where did it all start for you? And I guess just start wherever you want to start in that journey.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't on the couch. I grew up in a very sporty family. So I've got three older brothers and we played all sports. My dad used to play hockey and cricket, and they were probably the sports that we played the most in our family. I played them both, played football, tennis, all sports. I just loved them, just loved everything about it. That's where I kind of felt really safe playing sport. And it wasn't until we moved to Nottingham and we joined our local hockey club. It was actually a men's club, because back then there weren't a huge amount of, well, mixed clubs as they are now. So they didn't have any women's teams. But yeah, just went down on a Sunday morning for the junior training that just started up actually because of the sole gold medal win for the men in the 88 Olympics. And yeah, just kind of went from there every Sunday morning, like happens over thousands of clubs now in the UK. And kind of just, yeah, started to realise I got pretty good at it, got invited to county trials, territory trials, and then eventually junior England trials, and got selected for those various teams.
Yeah, so you started to, and I guess we'll get straight into it, is that you then represented Team GB, and you were the youngest person to represent Team GB at the Olympics. There will be some people that will first off, what was your experience like going into that whole realm as such a young person? I recently have spoken to a couple of Olympians. I recently spoke to Olympic swimmer Katie Hoff. She went to the Olympics at 15, but it's an individual sport. She's on her own. But you're going into a dressing room, a changing room, other people that have potentially asserted themselves within those positions and their roles. And so, what was your experience like going into that changing room?
So I think there was probably two different sides to it. There was the side of being with my teammates, and there was the side of kind of dealing with coaches and stuff like that. So I'll start with teammates. I don't know whether it was because of my upbringing and having three older brothers and just having to get on with stuff and just deal with whatever was thrown at me. It was something I didn't really feel like bothered me. I felt, as I said, I felt really comfortable in that kind of environment. I felt really safe. I used to, well, I still do, love having a laugh and a bit of a mess around with teammates and friends. And I actually very quickly got the nickname Cocky, which may give you an idea of how I was in that environment. I would just give things a go, trying to, when you play silly games like trying to hit the post from the halfway line, I would come up and just give it a go, and it would hit it, and everyone would be like, oh yeah, here she goes, Cocky. And I was just, just kind of joining in and messing around. And actually, credit to those players, they made me feel really welcome, which I think is the most important aspect. If that doesn't happen, then you can't feel comfortable. So I was joining the team at a similar time as a few of my club teammates, or certainly they were around, so they massively helped me feel welcome and really brought me into the group. And they were some of the more jovial, quite loud people in the team as well, which I think helped a bit. And then the flip side, there was the kind of coaching world, which 20 years ago, we're talking about a very different environment than we are now. Thankfully, thankfully it's changed, because back then, I talk about this a lot when I'm doing talks and things, is that it was very much a case of you get, told what to do, and if you don't do it, you get shouted at. And back then you didn't see anything wrong with it. That's just how it was. But people are starting to realize that's not how you get the best out of everybody. It certainly works for some, don't get me wrong, even though I think you don't have to do it for it to work. It was something that didn't hugely bother me, but I think in terms of getting my getting good performance out of me, I don't think it hindered it at all, and in some ways it maybe did help it. But in terms of relationships with coaches, that was something that I really did struggle with, and I don't think that kind of foundation helped at all. Even throughout the rest of my career, I then really struggled to kind of find that trust within coaches.
Yeah, that was kind of gonna be where I was gonna go with the next bit. There was, did you manage to develop a strategy or a way to manage? Did your coaches change? Like, did you get many changes of coaches, and if so, like, was there a way in which you tried and maybe failed, tried, succeeded in building those relationships a little bit better? I've had similar experiences, to be fair. I've had sort of night and day. And my experience, and something I struggle with now, it's almost like parenting. I find myself coaching, and I'm like, I might say something in the heat of a moment. I go, where the hell did that? Oh, I know where that came from. I recognize that. I know exactly where that came from. That's not what me. And I have to almost like literally meditate on it for a bit, go back and go, that's not me. This is not who I want to be. Did you find, firstly, a way in which you may have succeeded or failed in trying to build those relationships? And then what was it like for you as a coach as well?
Yeah, I think regrettably, I didn't really find a solution, or a way. I did have a few different coaches, but they changed a little bit towards the start. So still when it was done kind of in the old fashioned way. And then we had a coach come in 2005 who then stayed as our coach pretty much until the Rio Olympics. And so that was a long period of time with the same coach. And I personally never really kind of found that sweet spot with him, unfortunately. And it did get better over time, but unfortunately I didn't kind of find that. But for me as a coach now, and actually as a player, I took the old fashioned way of coaching on board, and I started to then, as a leader within teams, and as I got more experienced, I started to actually lead in the same way. And because like you say, you do things because that's how it's been done, and that's why those things carry on, even though deep down some people know it's wrong. And then it wasn't until kind of the London Olympic cycle where we started to change those things and started to really ask each other as teammates what it is that helps you, basically helps get the best out of you, whether it's on the pitch, off the pitch, whichever situation. And we started to really talk and open up and be vulnerable with each other, which helped with our connection as a whole squad, but also with performance. And so I really started to learn about myself, how I was impacting myself first and foremost, which is hugely important, but then also how I was impacting my teammates. And then taking that into coaching, I've almost now gone the complete opposite way.
Right.
So I've coached at Cambridge now for, well, one-ish season, because I started last year and then had my baby. So I didn't really coach the second half of the season. And then I've done this first half part of the season this year. And I've not really shouted at all, like not even once. And I don't even know whether I could, which is the opposite of where I started way back 20 years ago. And so I'm now, it's more about trying to understand, well, certainly value every single member of my team, and try and make them feel valued for the contribution that they bring, and just be curious about and understand them as people, not just on the pitch, but also off the pitch. And I actually just try and have a lot of fun and get them to enjoy it first and foremost.
Is there anything that you reckon you've learned from both of those experiences that you would tell your younger self of how to perhaps have managed it better now?
It's a tricky one, that, because I think, well, yeah, I mean, I definitely would just say to really listen, and be more kind of empathetic to where others are coming from, and what their experiences are, or what they might have been, and you know, that's one of the things I've learned, is that everybody has a story.
Mm.
Everybody has got to this moment in time, one way or another, and there are, you know, a million of different ways, and that's what makes that person that person. And all of those little bits of their story make them react to certain things in a certain way, or not react to certain things, and just that's what I'd probably say to my younger self. Just remember, everybody has a story, and try and think about that before kind of going in with 2 feet. I think it's really difficult though, because until you've kind of had that experience, and I mean, this you sound like an old person saying, you just don't know until you get older. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you almost do have to live through it a little bit, but yeah, I'm just pleased that I'm able to kind of see it a little bit now.
Yeah, I really do get that. That's something that I've valued massively with working with, especially younger people, is trying to understand where they've come from first. Where's their journey, and then some of their reactions make much more sense, or some of the frustrations that I may have with them make much more sense in how they may interpret that information because of how they are doing it. It could be at school, at home, with friends, or in any which way, and that makes total sense. And I think understanding that person, I also recognize it can be tough if you have a huge squad. So if you're managing sort of like I'm over 50 kids that we're trying to manage, so it's a big unit, and trying to get everyone's story is
Yeah.
a task. So but I just think there is an element in which you can try and just understand that individual if you do get that 5 minutes, 2 minutes on the sidelines with them, and just checking in with how they are outside of the
Yeah.
sport. What's going on in school, home? How's your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your everyone? Like, how's everyone going on? And see where they're at.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's something as well I'm kind of reading about and taking into parenting as well.
Yeah.
Like, just remembering that my daughter, she's doing her best, and that's all anyone's doing. They're doing their best at them in that moment, and trying to remember that, and just, yeah, being curious about why they may be behaving like they're behaving, or what they're doing. So yeah, curiosity, I think, is a good one.
You also, so you spoke about, I'm going to go back to you going into a changing room as a player, which is really interesting. You said you were really comfortable. That was your safe space. Coaches with the tough bit. What would you, as you transitioned and sort of became more of a senior figure in the changing room, then there was going to be new faces coming in, and you're going to be the one that's having to create that environment. Is there, first off, what is the advice you would give for those senior players for creating that environment? And also, what advice would you give to a younger player that's going into that environment to give themselves the best possible opportunity to, I guess, be accepted? Because you are coming into a tribe, in inverted commas. You are coming into a new tribe. So, yeah, what would be your advice? Firstly, as that senior figure, and then secondly, as a player.
Yeah, so I think the advice probably would be the same, but it's going to have a little bit of different emphasis. So as a senior player, I certainly realized, well, I didn't realize this was the problem. So I was, as a youngster, and then I got older and more experienced, and then suddenly you are now an experienced player, but you don't necessarily realize it. And so when new players came in, um, I didn't really start to realize that I was this person that needs to be welcoming this person in,
Yeah.
because I was still saw myself as, particularly because I got in quite young,
Mm.
but 5 years in, I'm 24. I'm still young, but actually I now need to, kind of flick that switch and realize that I'm now that senior player. And although regardless of age, if you've got an influence in the change room, then that's kind of something that you need to know. And so my very simple advice would be to, as a senior player, would be to go and say hello.
Yeah.
It's very simple. It's very simple.
Yeah.
But go and say hello, introduce yourself, get to know them straight away. That initial contact can make all the difference. And the moment you leave it until even the next time, that person who's new into the changing room is like, oh, they've now got a few doubts. So that's what I would say, is go and say hello as soon as you can. And people don't do it because they're afraid. They're afraid of making that connection, and not sure. And as a senior player, sometimes you're not sure what the new player is going to be like, and there's that potential kind of just thing that's there that you don't even realize. But as a senior player, you have to make that first move. You have to. That's what I would say. On the flip side, I would also say, is the new player coming in, try and go and say hello.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Try and be open to it. And hopefully the senior player will come up to you. But don't just assume that because they're the senior player that they are comfortable with themselves and have that ability to communicate. Because that's what it is. It's an ability to communicate, and not everybody has it. And just because you're a senior and experienced doesn't mean that you have it. And actually, as a junior player coming in, I know there was 100%. I was made to feel like that a little bit from some players, and I know now that it was because they were just nervous and they didn't know how to do it. And so yeah, I would just make the first move. Somebody just go and say hello, basically.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you talk about recognizing that a senior player is just another human being with their own sort of insecurities of how to communicate. And I've learned that this year about how small a move you can make to influence someone from a senior role. So the example I have is that we have one of the young players at our club, and I am one of the senior players at the club, and I got a message from our president, and he just sent a message and sort of commented on it saying like, "Good job, Lewis." And as I read through this message, it was from this young lad's mum saying like, "Thank you so much for the help you've been giving us a club, and just wanted to let you know that the young lad had said that how much Lewis had influenced him this year." And I was like, wow, this is interesting. But I actually thought back to the conversations I'd had with him. All I'd been doing was going up to him and saying, "Hello, how are you?" and pretty much making jokes about his mustache that he's growing. And he and we would have a laugh about it for one split second, for like 10 seconds of interaction, and I'd do that for a few times throughout the day, throughout the night, and that was it. And I'd had an influence on him, and for me, it just really shocked me at how big a influence you can have with such little effort. And I would always recommend, again, it doesn't take much, but you're so right in just having, it takes courage from that senior player. Just have the courage, have the bravery to step forward and be that person. Put it on yourself to say hello, be the commander in chief in some sort of way. It's a really, really 100%. Valuable point. Yeah. So as you've grown into the squad and you've started playing, obviously the Olympics comes up. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So you've had 2012 bronze medal in 2012, and then Rio, where it was a gold. And I wanted to really know what the difference was between those two Olympics. What did you find that as a squad, as an individual, was the big change that you had that allowed you to get that gold in 2016?
Yeah, so the London squad and the Rio squad were actually really quite similar in terms of the culture that we created. There was about half of the squad was different, so there was a reasonably big difference in terms of players actually at the games. But for me, I think the biggest difference was a value that we had for Rio, which was called "We Are Winners."
Right.
And so we had vision, values, and behaviours for London and for Rio, and they were really, really different, but they created a very similar culture. But the difference for me was this value, because I think in London we're maybe just a tiny little bit, and I mean a tiny little bit, but that is the difference, a little bit too nice. We didn't quite have, well, not necessarily too nice, but we just didn't quite really understand how to win in those moments that are so tight. Because, you know, to win a gold medal, those games are going to be tight. You're never going to be, you know, kind of winning medals 7-0, you know, 5-0, 4-0 even. It's more often than not one goal in it. And we had that value, and we really then started to talk about winning and kind of celebrate winning. We brought winning into our culture a little bit more, but also we were very specific with processes around scenarios within the game, kind of minutes within the game. So, you know, 2 minutes on the clock, how are we going to play, that kind of thing. 2 minutes is still a reasonably long time in hockey, but you know, just making sure that everybody was on the same page, knowing that even though 2 minutes on the clock, we're still going to play the same way. We're not going to suddenly just start hitting it into the circle, you know, that kind of stuff, getting really into the nitty gritty of the detail of how we wanted to be, how we wanted to behave in those kinds of moments, but then doing that in training. So practicing that in training constantly. And we had a session actually every Thursday, and it was called Thinking Thursday, where we kind of got set up into teams, and the coach would put like different rules in place, and he'd send out an email either the night before or on the morning. We'd kind of have to organize ourselves as players and kind of work out how we were going to get the most points out of the game with the rules and stuff like that. It was quite complicated, but we really think, but it was also about winning. So how are we going to play as our little small-sided team to win this game? And we really had to, and it was very competitive. We were very tired as well during that session, but it really helped us kind of get our minds into that moment when we might be in an Olympic Games or an Olympic final. So yeah, practicing those winning moments.
Yeah, how did you? That is definitely a culture shift that you're creating there. How did you get everyone on board?
So we spent a very long time coming up with our vision, values, and behaviours, and we did it as a team, and staff included. So we would, led by our psychologist, we split off into small groups. I remember for the Rio Olympic Games, we were asked the question, how do we want to be remembered? And that then really instigated a great conversation around the vision that we eventually came up with, which was to be the difference, create history, inspire the future. And it took time for both squads, for both Rio and London. We were in a place where we wanted to make this happen. And you know, not everybody agreed on the vision, values, and behaviors to begin with. You know, it was conversations, and people would make suggestions, and then we'd talk about it, and kind of it took a long time, and wasn't just suddenly, oh yeah, this is it, let's go for it. It kind of, and that's how we got everyone to buy in, because everybody was part of the discussion. Everybody's voice was heard. They felt listened to. The contributions were valued. And again, as senior players in that environment, it was a case of just stopping and making sure, and bringing people in to speak, making sure everyone had their say. And then the behaviors part of that was really important, because they were the things that were going to make us do it every single day. So we got our vision and our values, but we've had those in the past, and the difference was the behaviors, because they're if you don't deliver on them, you can't live up to your values, and you definitely won't achieve your vision. So those things were reinforced by leaders, by coaches. They were our words in the first place, so they were things that we would naturally say to each other, which helped to reinforce it. And then eventually they kind of became habits. And so when under the pressure of the Olympic Games, you're not thinking, oh, how should I be behaving? You're just doing it because we've done it every single day back at training.
Yeah, there must have been those behaviours make that. Just touching on those, they are what make you accountable, and you can literally hold each other accountable because they're the things that you're going to see day to day. There must have been a period where it was ugly and people were maybe messing up, and not always the behaviours were adhered to. Was there ways in which you held people sort of accountable? Was there how did you get through those sort of rough periods where it was patching it together, because that in itself is the tough period where it could all fall apart very quickly, and then, like you say, you break through it and it becomes habit, it just becomes instinctual. So when it's in that tough period, how were you managing that?
Yeah, I think certainly when our culture was good so we had a spell after the London Olympics, and before we started with our values, and before we had those conversations, and it was with a different coach, and that was a really bad spell, and we didn't have ownership, we didn't have everybody on board, and there was nowhere for that to go, because we hadn't bought into the behaviors, and like you say, we then couldn't make people accountable. But when the culture was sound and we had those processes in place, yes, there were definitely times when people didn't do the behaviors. First of all, there was a case of, okay, and actually this was something we brought into our culture, was to not go at that person straight away, and actually to maybe try and understand, well, why aren't they doing the behaviors? And actually have a conversation with them first and foremost, to understand a bit, similar to what I was saying before, get curious as to why. And that would be down to leaders. That was down to the player leadership group, to be honest with you, who kind of really had to take lead on that. And then there were other occasions where actually someone's just wearing the wrong kit and they should be wearing the right kit. And again, that was down to the leadership group to kind of pull them up and just say, you need to wear the right kit. And so as one of those members of the leadership group, I was very happy to not be the most popular person at times. That, as a leader, I think sometimes you have to be that person, and also be comfortable with being uncomfortable at times as well, because it's not always going to be easy, and holding people accountable is never easy. But that's the beauty of, if everybody's had that conversation and bought into it, it makes that conversation a lot easier, because you can say, you signed up to this, you were in those conversations, and you said that we wanted to behave like this, so why aren't you doing it? So it makes those conversations a lot easier if you've kind of brought everybody into the process from the start.
Did you feel the relationships with all the players started to strengthen over time? Did you suddenly see that bond coming in, and then did you start to feel sort of that confidence as a team?
Yeah, definitely. We did so much work with our psychologist as well on our self-awareness. We were taken out of our comfort zone so many times. I mean, every day, you could say, on the hockey pitch. And we were made, we were very vulnerable at times with each other, and we shared some very hard things, like even so we looked at things like what you like on a good day, what you like on a bad day, but we also talked about our strengths. Even talking about your strengths it makes you feel very vulnerable, and you don't necessarily think it, but actually, for us to stand up and say, this is what I'm good at and this is what I bring to the team, is a very hard thing to do. And so we did a lot of that work with our psychologist, and those conversations were just so valuable, and they were the things that built the trust, built the kind of that psychological safety, and built that connection, which I always say we weren't all best mates, but there was very much an underlying trust and respect amongst all of the squad. That kind of, that feeling where you just, someone's got your back. That's what we wanted to create.
Yeah, it sounds phenomenal. I think there's so many teams that will be doing that sort of thing, building their vision, values, and behaviours, and it really does take that accountability, the building of relationships. Exactly like you said, you don't have to be best friends with everyone. You haven't got to be everyone's best mate. You just have to pretty much all agree on that we want the same thing, and therefore there's some things that are non-negotiable. We're going to have to do it this way, and this is what we all want collectively. And I will understand you as a person. And it does take a lot of relationship management and understanding how you're going to talk to people in the right way, and you can go through personality profiling to get to that place. But I guess you had another dynamic as well with having Kate on the team as well, and managing your relationship within the team. If you could just touch on a bit of how you managed your relationship with Kate within the team, and I guess separating both home and work life and sport life.
Yeah, I think both of us were obviously very keen from the start for it to be a very, when we were at hockey, it was like, right, we're Helen and Kate hockey players, and we were very professional in that environment. And then probably the thing that did suffer was our relationship away from that, because we're too far that way, which is probably often the case because you don't want to be seen as unprofessional. And so it did take a good number of years actually to really figure out, kind of making sure that we created space for the separate parts of our lives. And that was, as a hockey player, as a couple, but also as an individual. And I think that's important for everybody. We all have different relationships, and whether even within teams, and you have to make sure you make time for each of those different relationships, and the most important one is the one that you have with yourself, and making sure that you make that time. But it took time to work it out. But we got there in the end eventually,
because there must have been, you must get to a point where you're literally living in each other's pockets, and I think for me, I was able to go to cricket and all my sports that I was playing, and that was my time, and that was my time from escaping with it. And if you've got Kate there as well, there's always going to be days in any relationship where you just are a little bit niggly and you're just on edge or whatever that's going on, and that must have been just a different way of managing in it and keeping yourself in check as well, I guess.
Yeah, and I think obviously loads of people work with their spouses and their partners, and I think that is probably the hardest thing. It's trying to find that space and time when you're at work as well, to not always be in each other's company. And that's another thing that we tried to do, was not to when we were at hockey, was trying to kind of split off a little bit and not be with each other all the time, which is difficult when you're in a really small team. In the grand scheme of things, it's a small team, and but yeah, we did our best. And I think again, the work that we did trying to work ourselves out was really helpful in that. I think we were genuinely very lucky with the work that we were able to do on our self-awareness and really starting to understand ourselves. Not many people get to do that in their job, so really grateful for that.
Yeah, I'd never take that for granted for what I was able to do as well. I encourage anyone, if you're curious about that sort of thing, or even if you're not, just find some way of delving into your own self-awareness and your own self first before you try to manage any relationship, whether it's with a spouse, a work colleague, or a coach, whoever. But it must have been as well so much sweeter at the end when you win the gold in 2016 and you get to share it together.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's I think as sports people, it's such a unique world. And when you get to experience something like that together, is amazing. But then actually, I think the best bit is afterwards, when you actually get to share that that thing always, if that makes
Mm,
sense. Just being understood, I think, by like really properly understood by your partner is, I think, probably, I don't, well, yeah, I mean, that's what you search for, isn't it? And the kind of the experiences we share just mean that we really get each other, to the point, when now one of us is kind of having a rough day, and all we need to say is, okay, I'm not feeling great today. I don't know why, but I'm not feeling great, and that's enough. That's all,
mm.
I need to kind of say, and we just get each other, and it's great to be able to have that thing that, you remember that thing we did a few
Yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
which does feel a little bit like now, actually. It's like, oh yeah, we won a gold medal.
Yeah. There's that really awesome photo of you two high-fiving behind one of your teammates' backs. That's
On
really,
the
really, yeah,
podium,
on the
yeah.
podium getting your gold medal.
I
That's a
know.
really cool photo. Very, very cool. Look, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I've got a couple more questions, and one of them, the first one is really leading into your experience now, having been a coach, transition from a player, and what is it you've learned the most about yourself, having had that transition period from player to coach, and that different dynamic, being the other side of the line?
Yeah, I think so. I've not done it for a huge amount of time. I think probably the thing that I've learned is, I went into it thinking, oh, I just want to make sure I speak to everybody, and value everybody, and make sure I kind of do all that kind of stuff. And it was a little bit harder than I thought it was, just in terms of time. I coach an amateur hockey team, so twice, 2 trainings a week in a match. And when, match day kind of goes so quickly, you've got all the match day preparation and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was just, there wasn't any time to
Mm.
speak to anybody. At training, you arrive and you just get going. But so I think the one thing that I tried to do was just to make sure I say hello to everybody, like I kind of said at the start, just make sure I am connecting with everybody in some way, even if it's just a tiny little way. But yeah, that lack of time, I think, was something that really stood out for me, or has stood out for me so far.
Yeah, they're taking a little bit of time as a coach to reflect on what you're doing is super valuable for sure. And the last little thing I would ask is, was there ever been like a piece of advice you've got, or maybe a book, it could be a documentary, an article, that you feel was maybe something really valuable, or would be of value to young athletes, other athletes, whether they're amateur or professional?
So I remember watching a TED talk back in 2014, and it was by Brene Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Yep.
Um,
I know the
she's
TED
a bit
talk
of
you're
a
going to talk
hero.
about.
Yeah, a bit of a hero of mine. And this may seem like not the TED talk that you'd kind of advise athletes to watch. I mean, I'd just advise anybody to watch it. It's called The Power of Vulnerability, and then she also does a follow-up one, which is just as good, possibly even better. I can't remember what that one's called, but I'm sure it would come up at the end. Um, and it's just, yeah, I watched it when I was in a real kind of dark hole, and it helped me just really understand what kind of life is about. And it's about giving your all, basically, and living life,
Mm.
wholeheartedly. She uses that word. And but when you do that, you're gonna fall down, you're gonna fail, and it's gonna be painful. And it just kind of really helped me remember that the most important thing was that I give my all. And yeah, it was kind of a bit life affirming.
Mm.
I would just watch it, and
Yep.
I think it just made me not feel quite so alone. um that we're all vulnerable. um we all feel feel pain at times, but if you're prepared to feel that pain, you will then feel the joy when it arrives. So yeah, I can't really do it justice by explaining it.
No, it is. I second that. It is one of the best TED Talks. It's probably one of the most highly viewed TED Talks as well, for sure, on YouTube. I'll definitely leave that link in the show notes for that TED Talk. Helen, that was an amazing place to, I think, wrap it up. But I really appreciate your time. If people want to reach out to you, find you on social media's website, where's the best place? I'll leave it up here for you to tell them where best to find you.
So Instagram actually is probably the place that I'm on the most.
Mm-hmm.
I think my account is Helen Richardson-08 maybe. I'm also on Twitter, and I do have a website, Helen Richardson-Walsh, helenrichardson-walsh.com. So yeah, reach out, and I'm always happy to interact with people on Instagram, for sure.
All the links will be in the show notes. Helen, thank you again for so much of your time. There's some amazing stuff there, and some really open and honest stuff that people can take away from it. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.